This video is all about how to answer your assignment in Year 10 Geography. So what I'm going to be doing is breaking down the task, giving you some hints and some help about how to get the best possible grade. So we're going to be looking at evaluating. That's the key NESA word. So in your question where we're evaluating past and the present government policies, we need to know what that means. So when we evaluate something, we make a judgment based on a criteria and determine the value of something. So what we're asking you to do is not to just describe, explain a policy. We're asking you to evaluate. So that is really important to start off with. So we are evaluating. So what does the criteria mean when we evaluate something? Well, it's a standard or principle for judging. All right, so that's what the criteria means. And it's basically features, ideals, or requirements on which we can make that judgment for an evaluation. So, for example, a customer in a clothing store might judge the value of an item based on criteria such as cost, quality of material, and the likelihood of wearing it. So that's how someone would evaluate the cost of clothing based on those three criteria. And that's what you're going to have to do in your final task as well. Sorry, and I totally forgot, we've got one there about coolness factor, like how good it looks on people. Now, going over to the task, let's have a look at the question. We've got to evaluate the success of past and present government policies as well as Indigenous activism towards well-being of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island peoples. So that's what we're going to be doing. So remember, in geography, we're looking at well-being. We're going to be evaluating the well-being of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island peoples. So let's have a look about what we're going to do. So in the task instructions, you've got to find two geographical representations which answer the question. And the criteria that you can use, and I'll just get the highlighter here, can be on citizenship, impacts on areas of universal human rights and liberty, life expectancy, education, health, languages, spatial differences, social, economic, cultural and heritage, reconciliation and equality. So they're just some of the criteria that you can use to evaluate what the government is doing to try and improve the well-being of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So when we look at the marking criteria, this is really important. So in geography, you're going to have you have to write your answer for geography. It's going to be separate to history, but the same question. This is what we're looking for. This is what the top band will look like. Makes a comprehensive and well-reasoned evaluation and judgment. What does that mean? Well, it means basically that you've looked at the policies, you've made a judgment, but you've used at least three criteria which supports your argument. And we're going to give you some examples of that later on. What you're going to have to do to get into that top band is select and integrate, which means, to work into your answer, two geographical sources. All right, two geographical sources. You've got to have that to get in the top band. And what we're looking for is sophisticated geographical vocabulary. So in your answer, you've got to use sophisticated words. So what that would mean, instead of lots, you'd say significant. Instead of good, important, significant, that type of idea. And it's got to be sustained, logical and cohesive response, clearly written. So what that sounds like, basically a sustained piece of writing. Basically, when I'm reading it, I can actually hear your voice. I don't need to read it 2 or 3 times. It's really nice and clear. So that's what we mean by that. So that's what we're looking for. That's the top band. And like I said, later in the video, we'll go through some examples of that. So what we're going to look at now is to start looking at your stimulus for your for geography. It's going to be slightly different from history, but this is what we're going to be looking at now. So what you've got to do is select a stimulus that is well linked to the question. So this is why that reading activity that we've done and some of the class lessons we've looked at different sources. You've got to decide, is your stimulus going to answer the question? If not, choose a different one. And basically, it's got to allow you to scope to discuss several issues. So we're looking for something that you can, write about, not just something that's just factual all the time. All right. Now, your stimulus could be a suitable map, graph, table, infographic, diagram, photo, or quote from a document or news article. What you've got to do is print that stimulus out, bring it to the exam, and after the exam, you have to leave it in the exam room, and that's where we're going to collect them all and we're going to have a look at them. You need to write the source. So if you got the source from a website, you need to tell us where it's from. So that's how we're going to select your geographical stimulus. What you need to do is to review and explore the data. So you need to make sure you read over your stimulus carefully. You're probably going to need it several times. You may want to keep notes about your thoughts or ideas or any questions you've just made from your learning. And you need to start thinking about, where was it from? Who collected the data? Is it useful, reliable, or unbiased? This is that crossover with geography and history. So a reliable source is going to be from the Australian government. Okay. You need to start looking at what the trends and patterns or messages are from that stimulus. You need to start thinking what's interesting, worrisome about the data that's in that stimulus. And you need to start working out how's it connected to the topic of your assignment, and what criteria in your evaluation is it going to be best related to. So that's what you've got to do once you've found your stimulus. If you can answer all those questions, you've got a good piece of stimulus, and you need 2 of those. Now, we'll do this activity in class, but it's really important to look at these key verbs, because what you're going to do is use these key verbs in your answer. And as we go down this page of verbs in a question, they basically get harder. So this is why we're evaluating, because it is quite a high order thinking. So when you're writing and starting to plan, what you can do is start using these different steps, using your stimulus to start writing a response, like a little draft that you might want to do, and then obviously show your classroom teacher. So these are some steps that we're going to look at. So we obviously want to hit the end bit, the evaluate, but we're going to start here. So we've got to start identifying the main component. What are the features and characteristics? What is the main component? And start building on that. What's the functional purpose? What is the effect of this component? How does this impact? How does it relate to the set criteria and idea? That's what critically analyze means. Evaluate, to what extent is the impact effective? So that's what we're going to be building on. And I'm going to show you some examples in a minute. So remember that when we're looking at this, these are some of the suggested criteria that we suggest that you use. So you've got to start deciding on that criteria before you can start evaluating. So here's some other criteria as well that you can look at. So if you want to quickly pause the video, have a look at those criteria that you can use. I hope they might be helpful if you've got your stimulus. And then step 4, a thesis. You've got to select the criteria you're going to use to evaluate your source. The first thing you've got to do is write a sentence thesis of what you're arguing with this piece of evidence or source. You should use this sentence as the start and maybe at the end of your paragraph about the source. So once you've selected that, once you've selected your stimulus, you've checked that it's reliable, useful, you've looked at how you can put it into your criteria, then you're going to write a little thesis, that one sentence. And that's how we can get from identify, describe, explain, critically analyze to evaluate, because that's what you're going to talk about, how effective or how successful that policy is. So what we're going to do now, we're going to start looking at a source that you can start putting together a like paragraph that's structured with all those different verbs, so you can get an idea of what we mean by outline, describe, explain, compare, contrast, discuss, evaluate, assess. So what I want you to do now is to pause the video, have a look at the next slide as well, and fill in that table. So this is the table that I want you to have a look at, and to use the previous slide to try and fill out, give some practice about how you can write your detailed paragraphs. So what we need to do is to do that, have a look at the graph. Very, very important. Take some time to do this. So press the pause video, get an answer, and then what we'll do, I'll talk about an actual paragraph that we can use, like a good example for the assessment, and you compare your paragraph to that. Okay, so hopefully you've done your paragraph now. So pulling it all together, you've got that task one where you're evaluating the success of past and present government policies, as well as Indigenous activism towards the well-being of Aboriginal people. This is the formula you can use for the two geographical evaluation paragraphs. So what's the critical issue? So we're talking about life expectancy. Where's the evidence? That population pyramid. Explain the problem. Aboriginal people are not living as long as non-Aboriginal people. Use the evidence from the pyramid to explain that further. Literally, explicit data from the pyramid. Why is this case? So to explain, cancer rates, smoking, access to healthcare. There's heaps of different reasons. What are the solutions? Obviously, government projects, advertising, funding, and then are they accessible? Evaluate the effectiveness of the government and what extent of the government policies actions improve well-being in people in Australia. Give your thesis opinion, but remember, don't use first person. All right, it's very formal. All right, so that's what we're looking at. So here's a little model of what we're looking for. This is what I really like to get you into that 70 to 20 bracket. So I just want you to pause it now, have a read, and I'll come back to you in a second. So hopefully you've paused that. Look at your paragraph that you did from the previous section and see what the differences are. What can you do to improve your writing? Because that's going to be the key thing. It's really important that you make that judgment based on your criteria. So yeah, really important that you look at your writing. If you want to, do a paragraph, show one of your teachers and myself, feel free to do that. Just some additional things to consider about your stimulus. Think about your origin, who created the source, what type of source is it, perspectives, what point of view is the source created from, the context, when was the source created, what historical events happened at the time that are important to the creation of this source. Even in contemporary geography, we can look at that. So it's not just related to history. Audience, who's the intended audience of the source? And motive, what was the purpose for that source made? And then overall, think about the trustworthy of the source. So here's some, just to finish off, there's been a lot of information there, but here's some ideas about your stimulus source for you guys if you're struggling a bit. Remember, you can bring in the article as a stimulus source. If you want to highlight some of the key points, if you just want to summarize, bring in your stimulus, that's fine. Okay, so here's some little sort of additional resources, and I hope this video has been helpful for you, and good luck. Thanks.